Our visit was an instructive one. We were deeply touched by the trust and friendliness shown to us, and once again we had the impression that we were not amongst them as strangers. We were presented with garlands of flowers. This Indian custom is a very charming one. There are simple jasmine wreaths, fragrant and delicate, others rich and heavy, made of red roses intertwined with silver threads. All are sweet-scented and beautiful. They never look out of place, whether worn by men or women, and only add to the grace of the Indian dress. Hearing that we took an interest in Indian music, one of our Tanjore friends was anxious that we should meet a man who was trying to harmonize Indian tunes to suit Western taste. We were taken to his house and received with much cordiality. Though we had a strong misgivings on the subject, we did not wish to harbor preconceived opinions and were curious to hear what his efforts had led to. Several records were put on the gramophone, to which we listened with growing dismay. Trained as we had been of late to appreciate the best and purest of Indian music, we were able to judge in some measure the grievous wrong that was being done, no doubt with the best of motives. We made no attempt to hide our feelings and expressed our opinions frankly. As Europeans, we felt entitled to speak against such desecration of the true Indian music, which Western ears should learn to appreciate in all its purity. Thus, to harmonize the ragas is to cut the wings of a skylark and expect to hear it sing as though it were soaring in the heavens. The inspiration is gone. Instead of the spirit being uplifted and losing itself in the divine, it is dragged down to earth and kept prisoner amongst harmonies which bind and cramp the higher aspirations. Unfortunately, this westernizing of the music is much in favor with Christian missionaries, who are beginning to adapt it to their hymns, which thus retain a familiar tune appreciated by Indian Christians. One can only hope that the harm done will be noticed in due time and measures taken to prevent it. Before taking leave, our host, who is not only a musician but an excellent photographer, showed us some beautiful views. We were glad to be able to admire and appreciate his pictures. Indeed, he was kind enough to present us with some of them, showing he in no way resented our somewhat severe judgment of his musical efforts. A few hours' journey brought us to Trichinopoly, clustered at the foot of a high, solitary rock which towers above the town. Rising thus from the vast plain, it is not surprising that this strange peak should have been attributed to a supernatural cause. It is said to be part of a sacred mountain in the Himalayas, whose summit was torn asunder and hurled through space during a battle between the gods. A temple dedicated to Shiva in his mother aspect has been built on the summit and is a very sacred place of worship and pilgrimage. The house placed at our disposal was surrounded by a pleasant garden on the outskirts of the town. It was used only for occasional meetings, and as we were the only occupants, we were free to make our own arrangements. Vegetables and fruit were brought to us, and we cooked our own food over a small kerosene stove. There was a good supply of drinking water, and above all, sufficient for washing purposes. Nothing is more refreshing in the heat than the Indian way of bathing, which is by pouring water over oneself. Hindus, far from being less clean than Europeans, have a far more rigid conception of cleanliness than that prevailing in the West. It is in fact a religious duty to be carried out with the greatest care, and Brahmins will even refuse to take food without having previously bathed and put on freshly washed clothes. We were invited to partake of a meal at the house of one of our new friends and were introduced to his numerous family, whose members seemed to appear suddenly from all sides. Besides his wife and children, we met his father, an orthodox old Brahmin who did not altogether approve of our presence, a married brother and sister with their own offspring, and various other people whose relationship we did not gather. They all seemed to live very happily together, and the household appeared to run smoothly, each member having his own duty to perform and doing it with serene contentment. It is the Hindu custom that the men have their meals before the women, and so we found ourselves alone, sitting cross-legged on the floor opposite our host, and waited upon by his wife and elder daughters. The rice, vegetables, and all sorts of Indian delicacies were placed before each person in little bowls on a large round tray, shining like gold. Knowing that we were not used to the chilies and red pepper which abundantly flavor all Indian cooking, especially in the South, care had been taken to omit these to some extent, and we were able to get over the function with comparative ease without disgracing ourselves. The young people peeped at us behind the door and seemed greatly amused by the awkward manner in which we handled our food. Walking back to our house, we were obliged to cross a wide open space. The neighboring children had learnt of our arrival and closely watched our comings and goings. Do what we might, their sharp eyes detected us from a long way off. They came rushing along, and we were quickly surrounded by 20 or 30 curious little urchins. We had even to give up the prospect of taking photographs or painting because of our tyrannical bodyguard. The more intrepid of the crowd managed to climb over the hedge and invade the garden, so as to look through the windows and satisfy their inquisitiveness. Sri Rangam, a few miles from Trichinopoly, is famous for the great temple dedicated to Vishnu, which is one of the oldest and largest in South India. 7 walls encircle the town, leading finally through successive sculptured doorways to the temple. The sun was so hot that it was painful to walk barefoot on the burning pavements, but we reluctantly parted with our sandals so as to go round the vast courtyards to the 1,000-pillared hall. The distances and proportions were so bewildering that in the semi-darkness it seemed as if we had entered a forest of closely growing trees. We sought in vain to approach the sanctuary. The rules are exceedingly strict, and non-Hindus may only perceive the golden dome from the top of a flat roof, surrounded by more walls and inner courtyards. The feeling was quite different from that of the temples dedicated to Shiva, though the difference is not easy to express in words. On the way back, we stopped at the banks of a river. Groves of graceful palm trees reached to the edge of the water. In midstream, patient bullocks were being scrubbed with brushes. Naked children played and swam about, while women washed their saris and laid them out to dry on the sandy banks, where they made bright patches of color. The adjoining Shiva temple, though small and unobtrusive, proved interesting. Here Shiva is worshipped in his aspect of water, and the Shiva lingam is so arranged as to be always surrounded by running water.